Before every meal, Jesus paused. He did not simply eat, he spoke. What came out of his mouth in those moments was not a religious ceremony. It was a sonic activation, the ancient Aramaic word he used. The one science is only now beginning to understand, carries a vibrational frequency that restructures matter at the molecular level. This is not a metaphor. Water responds to sound, bread responds to intention, and Jesus knew exactly which sounds to use. Researchers studying manuscripts predating the Greek New Testament by centuries have uncovered Aramaic blessings that reveal what was spoken before. Translators softened the words and institutions buried the practice. These are the original sounds. The ones spoken before, the world forgot what language the kingdom of heaven actually speaks. What you are about to receive will change the way you eat, drink, pray, and exist. Because the moment Jesus lifted that bread and opened his mouth, he was not blessing food. He was activating a gateway between the physical and the divine. This teaching has been kept in the margins of ancient manuscripts for over 2,000 years. Today, it surfaces again. And you are watching this for a reason. There is a moment in the ancient world that most people have completely misunderstood. When Jesus took bread in his hands and looked toward heaven, the crowd around him assumed he was performing a religious ceremony, but those who understood the ancient Aramaic tongue knew something far more profound was happening. They recognized that Jesus was not reciting tradition, he was transmitting frequency. The word that Jesus used in this sacred act was burik. In the ancient Aramaic language, burik carries the root meaning of bending the knee, not in submission to fear, but in recognition of divine presence flowing through matter. When Jesus spoke Errico over bread, he was declaring that the physical substance before him was now a conduit for divine intelligence. This is a fundamentally different concept from what religious translation has handed us. In the Greek translations that followed, the Aramaic burik was rendered as a generic word for blessing. But something vital was lost in that transition. The original Aramaic sound, the vibration of burik, is not merely a word. It is a tuning fork. And Jesus understood that sound does not simply communicate meaning. Sound transforms substance. Modern acoustic biology confirms what ancient mystics encoded in their sacred texts. Water changes its crystalline structure when exposed to specific sound frequencies. Organic matter responds to vibrational intent. What Jesus was performing over bread and water was not symbolic. It was scientific spiritual technology, applied with the precision of someone who understood the architecture of creation itself. The disciples recorded this act not once, not twice, but in multiple accounts across all 4 gospel traditions. That repetition is not coincidence. Jesus was teaching by demonstration, giving the world a reproducible practice, a living instruction in how to interact with physical reality through sacred sound. Understanding these frequencies is the first step, but mastering their vibration in your daily life is where the true miracle happens. I receive many messages asking for the correct pronunciation and sequence of these sounds, so I have prepared 2 sacred guides to help you bridge this gap. You can find the link pinned in the comments to begin your practical journey today. Water held a sacred position in the ancient Near East that modern culture has largely forgotten. For the Aramaic-speaking world of Jesus, water was not merely a physical substance. It was a living medium, a carrier of divine information capable of receiving, storing, and transmitting the spoken word of the Creator. The ancient texts describe water as the first created substance, the original medium through which the voice of the divine moved to bring all life into existence. When Jesus spoke burik over water at the wedding in Cana, at the River Jordan, and in the upper room of the Last Supper, he was not performing magic. He was restoring water to its original function. He was reminding matter of its divine assignment, the sound of burik, its specific consonants. Its rhythmic breath pattern carries a vibratory signature that the ancients understood as the frequency of recognition. When water is spoken to with burik, it is being told, "You are seen, you are chosen, you are now a vessel for the sacred." The research of Japanese scientist Masaru Emoto demonstrated in the 20th century what Aramaic mystics encoded 2,000 years earlier. Water exposed to words of love and blessing forms geometrically perfect crystalline structures. Water exposed to harsh or degraded language collapses into chaotic, incomplete forms. Jesus knew this not as an experiment, but as an axiom. a self-evident truth embedded in the nature of creation itself. This is why the act of blessing before meals is not a cultural tradition. It is an energetic technology. Every time Jesus lifted bread and water and spoke Barak into that moment, he was recalibrating the molecular structure of the substance in his hands, charging it with a frequency. His body and the bodies of those around him were designed to receive and integrate at the deepest cellular level. If this teaching is stirring a deep resonance in your heart, it is a sign that your soul is ready to return to its original blueprint. To support you in this transition, my guides explain the layers of meaning behind the first sacred words, offering you a path to clear the interference of the world. The link to access these tools is waiting for you in the pinned comment. The account that appears in all 4 canonical Gospels, the feeding of 5,000 people, is not merely a miracle story. It is the most publicly documented demonstration of what Jesus understood about the relationship between sacred sound and material expansion. In that moment, Jesus did not pray for more bread. He did not ask the Father to multiply what was there. He took what existed, looked toward heaven, and spoke Barak. And the bread expanded to meet the need of every person present. The Aramaic worldview holds that physical matter is not fixed. It is responsive. Creation is not a completed event that happened once and stopped. It is an ongoing conversation between the divine voice and the material world. When Jesus activated Barak over 5 loaves and 2 fish, he was participating in that conversation with absolute clarity and authority. He was not hoping. He was knowing, and the matter around him responded to that knowing with complete obedience. What is rarely discussed in modern religious teaching is the energetic impact that event had on the 5,000 people who ate that bread. They were not simply fed in the physical sense. Every person who consumed bread charged with the frequency of Barak, spoken by Jesus himself at the height of his spiritual authority, received a transmission. The food had become a vessel, and those who ate it received both nourishment and activation simultaneously. This dual function of sacred food is echoed throughout the ancient Near Eastern traditions that Jesus drew from. The bread was never just bread. Water was never just water. When consecrated through the living frequency of Barak, these substances became bridges, points of contact between the seen and the unseen realms. Jesus was not performing isolated miracles. He was revealing a universal principle, that when the correct sound is applied with full spiritual authority, matter bends in complete and immediate response. No moment in the ancient record captures the depth of Jesus's transmission more completely than the final meal he shared with his disciples. The room was charged, and yet Jesus did not perform a lengthy ceremony. He took bread, spoke Baruch, broke it, and passed it. Then he lifted a cup of water mixed with wine and spoke Barak again. In that double activation, he encoded his most permanent and personal teaching. The disciples present at that table were not simply sharing a meal. They were receiving an initiation. When Jesus said, "This is my body, this is my blood," he was speaking in the Aramaic tradition of covenant language, a declaration that the substance in his hands now carried the full vibrational imprint of his divine consciousness. The Barak he spoke was not a prelude to the act. The Barak was the act. The blessing was the mechanism. The sound was the bridge. Ancient Aramaic scholars point to the specific phrasing Jesus used in the upper room, as unlike any standard blessing formula of his era, he spoke with first-person authority, not invoking a divine name above him, but speaking as the living voice of that name itself. This distinction was entirely lost in translation. Jesus did not say, "May this bread be blessed." He said, "This bread is blessed." The present tense, the certainty, the absolute authority of someone who did not separate himself from the divine source he carried within. When Mather hears that kind of certainty, when Barak is spoken not as a request but as a declaration, the response of physical reality is immediate and total. The bread at that table was not ordinary bread after Jesus spoke over it. It was living intelligence in physical form, and every person who received it received not only food for the body but a transmission that has reverberated through human history for 2,000 years. The teaching that Jesus gave through his repeated use of Barak over bread and water was never intended to remain in the historical past. It was a demonstration with the explicit purpose of repetition. When Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me," the Aramaic word he used for remembrance was not a passive recall of memory. It was an active instruction to reenact, to reactivate, to speak the same frequency into the same substances and expect the same result. He was not describing a ceremony. He was handing over a living technology. Your body is approximately 60% water. The food you consume becomes the building blocks of every cell in your physical form. When you approach your meals in silence, in distraction, in anxiety, in guilt, you are interacting with those substances without the frequency that Jesus demonstrated was essential. You are bypassing the activation layer. You are eating the vehicle without igniting the engine. But when you bring your hands to your food, pause and speak Barik, even quietly, even imperfectly, even as a beginning, something shifts. The molecules of what you are about to consume receive the signal. Your own cells move into a receptive state, and the gap between the physical act of eating and the spiritual experience of being nourished begins to close. This is not mysticism. This is the practical application of what Jesus practiced publicly in front of witnesses in multiple recorded accounts across cultures and centuries. The ancient Aramaic teachers who preserved these practices understood that Barik is not reserved for extraordinary moments. It belongs at the beginning of every meal, every glass of water, every act of physical nourishment. Jesus showed his followers that the sacred is not separate from the daily. The divine frequency of Barik is not for temples and altars alone. It is for your kitchen table. It is for this moment. It is for you. What Jesus was doing every time he lifted bread and spoke Barik over water is now clearer than it has ever been. He was not following a religious script. He was demonstrating a living law, a principle woven into the fabric of creation itself, encoded in the sound patterns of the ancient Aramaic tongue, and available to every human being willing to learn how to apply it. The nourishment of the body and the activation of the spirit were never meant to be separate experiences. Jesus unified them at every meal. He showed his disciples, and through them the entire world, that what we consume becomes what we are, and that what we speak over our food determines the quality of that becoming. Barik is the key that unlocks that process. It is not a magic word. It is a living frequency that carries the memory of divine creation every time it is spoken with intention and authority. And the record shows that Jesus returned to it again and again, not because it was ritual, but because it worked. You have sat with this teaching today. Something in you has shifted, perhaps subtly, perhaps profoundly. That shift is real. It is the cellular recognition of a truth your body was built to receive. Do not let this moment pass without carrying it forward. Begin tonight. Before your next glass of water, pause. Bring your full presence to it. Speak Barik over it quietly or aloud, once, with intention, and listen with your whole being for the response. The teaching of Jesus was always practical. It was always personal. And it was always meant for you. Visit Divine Light Academy at the link below to access my complete guides and start your journey into the living language of the Masters. But before you go, I want to hear from you. What did you feel during this session? Comment I received to seal this message below. If you felt a shift in your energy today, we read every response, and your testimony strengthens this entire community of light. Right now, before you close this video, come to the comments and tell us, what did you feel? What shifted? We read every single response. And if this teaching found you today, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we go deeper into the ancient frequency codes that were always meant to be yours. We are just scratching the surface of this ancient power. Get ready, because in our next video, I will reveal even deeper Aramaic codes that unlock spiritual authority you've never imagined. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss this unfolding revelation.